I'm Lee Dunstan of App State's Walker College of Business, and welcome to the Academics. Please meet our panel: Nancy Love of Government and Justice Studies, Paul Gates of the Department of Communication, and Michael Wade of App State's History Department. Well, we can't get away, panel. We just can't get away. We can't escape Trump. And the question, I think, is should we even be talking about him? He seems to be hogging up all the news. And I think we have to talk about him because sometimes he says something that seems rational, and a lot of times he says something that seems irrational, but many millions of people think he is, quote, authentic. So, campaign finance reform. Where are we on that in the Trump world? Paul?
Well, in the Trump world, he is opposed to the way we do it now, and he's right. We've had two decisions from the Supreme Court in the last couple of years that have skewed the financial picture for elections in the United States because they have allowed unlimited money into campaigns. First, it was unions and corporations that could spend unlimited amounts on behalf of candidates. Then it was individuals. All restrictions were taken off individual donations on behalf of campaigns. And that's, of course, the little trick is that it's supposed to be on behalf of campaigns, but I think anybody who believes that, we've got a bridge, that kind of thing. But he's fundamentally correct that it's perverting the system.
Question. I've missed it if he has. What does he propose to do about it?
As I understand it, his proposal is along the following lines. A, that anybody that makes a contribution to a candidate, whether it is a PAC or whatever, needs to be immediately transparent. Who it is, who they are, who they're affiliated with, and how much they've contributed and to whom. So he's not talking about putting limitations on money. He's talking about total transparency as to identity of the donor and as to the amount.
And that's exactly right. I mean, that's exactly what we should do. I mean, this exposes what is now known as dark money, and to the daylight that should prevail, and so we can see who's buying whom.
But it's not enough.
Yeah, actually, I didn't miss that. I just it's so ephemeral given the problems that we have. Real campaign finance reform would entail limiting the duration of political campaigns to 6 or 8 weeks, the way they do in countries where the governments work, and it would entail public financing of campaigns. And so, how do you do that? How about a blue ribbon citizens panel of people above reproach? No congressmen, senators, lobbyists, former congresspersons on corporate sinecures, special pleaders, paid mouthpieces, all out. Real citizens of accomplishment, people like Jimmy Carter, who probably will not be available because of health issues. Private citizens with real records of public service to deal with this issue and put it in the form of legislation and let the present Congress run for election and re-election on that.
Interesting idea. Nancy, is that a bridge too far?
I don't think it's a bridge too far. I think what it does is engage the deeper issues, which is that buying a product is not the same thing as casting a vote. An individual choice is not the same thing as a collective process. And to state it even more strongly in terms of the deeper problems, I really don't think money is speech. And I don't think market processes are democratic deliberations. So your proposal would significantly decrease the corrupting influence of big money on our democratic system. Mm-hmm. And I think nothing less will make a difference.
And while they're at it, have this panel add one on the back end. Bar people leaving Congress from accepting jobs as paid lobbyists for 10 years following the termination of their service. We need people. We need public servants instead of what we currently have.
Paul, what do you think?
Hey, we got to put that all together. I mean, one is just a half measure. We've got to have everything. If we're really serious about the reform, you've got to do it all. All the things we've talked about, I think, are reasonable, and this is exactly what.
Well, they may be reasonable, but are they really practical? In the world we live in, how are you going to get beyond saying money is not free speech, with which I completely agree? How are you going to get beyond that into the world of real regulation, such as Michael and the rest of the panel are seeming to, I mean, we need to be realistic about where we're headed here.
Well, we could start with a change on the Supreme Court. That would be number one in my book. And then we could go on to the other things. We'd have to overcome this Congress we've got to pass legislation that would do the things that we're advocating. It's a big job.
Let me ask the panel, would you be willing to live with something so simple as the Trump plan, all right? The Trumpenstein plan. Would you be willing to live with complete transparency about who made the donation, who they're affiliated with, and the amount?
No, because it leaves the money in politics. It still gives us a 1.5 or 2 year long campaigns, which privileges money. The problem is not that these proposals are impractical. The problem is that they are practical, and that they would change things. The issue is not practicality; it's resolve.
Well, I could live with the transparency, but that's not enough. I could live with it for a couple of years, but I need more.
Well, the transparency, though, may help mobilize the political will for a change in the campaign finance system. It may be a series of events that we need.
I see you nodding your head, yes, Mike.
I'm just listening to what Nancy was saying. I think you go all in on this one. What good is a political system that doesn't address real problems with real solutions? What good are candidates who don't?
Okay, well, that certainly can't be seen from Mike as an endorsement of the partial solution.
He started a conversation. I think one of the reasons Trump has caught on to some extent is that he's actually identified a couple of real problems. We may not like exactly how he approaches them, but the other candidates aren't. They're posturing, they're preening, they're getting their bios out there,
right.
And we've got empty suits.
And that's why he manages to get this moniker authenticity. Yeah,
it's not hard with that kind of.
So let's, since we're on Trump and since we're on the presumably big issues here, immigration. So, Paul, Trump has what some might call, on campaign finance, he has what you might call a slightly reformist idea that we've just discussed. But on immigration, he approaches white supremacy.
Well, he's following the law to the letter. He's identified 11 million illegal immigrants, undocumented aliens, who are present in violation of federal statutes on immigration that have been in place. I think the statute he's talking about, that section, was part of the rewrite in 1986. This is not a new statute. And he wants it enforced. He's looking at the law that says that aliens must present themselves for examination at the border, and he points to the 11 million that have not done that, and he wants, since they're here, what he wants to do, of course, is deport them. Which is a different question, but he identifies the problem correctly, that there is wholesale violation of federal immigration statutes.
Mike, what do you think?
Well, I think deporting 11 or 12 million people is impractical. I think,
but Paul says it's the law.
well, it is the law, and there are people who should be, the law should be enforced, but saying that you're going to send 12 million people home I don't think anybody believes that's really going to
Well, there have been deportations over the years by the millions.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, the Obama administration's actually been more effective than any administration since 1955.
So the law is being followed, and Trump wants it followed more rigorously.
And Trump has an idea that he wants to have a wall, 1,800 miles long, and he's going to make it beautiful. He's going to make it high. Mm-hmm. Not a little wall, a beautiful wall and a high wall, he says. Nancy, what about this idea of walls?
Well, aside from the impracticality of this particular wall that's been proposed, I think what's interesting is there's a more general phenomenon here of wanting walls and fences and gates to distinguish between what's outside and foreign and what's inside and us, in quotes, in the sense of a white nation. And that's the anxiety of many white citizens confronted with a globalizing world. And walls aren't going to solve it. I think that we need to look at ourselves and become comfortable with more diverse communities and with the members of our nation who are non-white and embrace that diversity.
I think, I don't disagree, but I think that that approach to explaining why people would respond to Trump and a wall or any other immigration change efforts doesn't get us very far because ultimately. It's perfectly possible to oppose illegal immigration without reference to color or ethnicity or anything else on the grounds that this is a planet exploding with people that we don't have. We're not going to be able to sustain just ever increasing numbers of people. Even if they were English.
Well, I don't think, though, that the opposition is colorblind or nation blind or.
Oh, I don't either.
Yeah, and so the question then is what's motivating it? And one of my colleagues, Wendy Brown, has written a very interesting book called Walled States Waning Sovereignty, about the attempt to shore up the nation state by defining its borders as an expression of the anxiety about inner and outer worlds that has been triggered by globalization. And again, it's not a practical proposal. And so what is motivating it? And I think we saw Trump's anxiety when he was interacting with Jorge Ramos in his recent press conference. Whatever you thought about Ramos's persistency, he wasn't screaming at Trump. He wasn't being emotional. He became an American citizen in 2008. He has 2 million viewers for his nightly Spanish language news program, which he anchors on Univision. He deserves respect. He was trying to have a dialogue.
Well, here's a bit of devil's advocacy, and I do think there's something to it. However, nation state. What bothers me about a wall is looking like the Soviets in Berlin, although for different reasons. But there's to some extent, if problems like this don't get addressed, we are awash in citizens already who don't believe that the government is serving the public interest and the national interest. So if this becomes another place where the government doesn't work on behalf of is seen not to work on behalf of the country, I think we just the result is that we're going to worsen the situation where we've got more and more people who would like to secede, would like to do this, would like to do that, there's a problem there.
Well, don't forget that the wall is part of a two-part plan. He identifies the the anchor baby problem, as he describes it, and would like to prohibit undocumented aliens from delivering American citizens in the United States, having children here, and would like to, we mentioned this in a previous show, that this would require a change in the 14th Amendment. He's, I think, trying to exploit the fact that the 14th Amendment doesn't say anything about the citizenship status of the parents, but it's pretty clear on the citizenship status of the children, I think, but he's exploiting that loophole with the parents.
Here's a question for Trump. Who's going to build your wall?
Oh, he claims that he's
Mexico's
going
gonna
to
pay
get
for
it
it.
from the Mexicans as a result of taking some of the money that they send back to Mexico, using it as a surcharge and putting it right into the wall fund.
Well, that's the finance.
And it's so simple, he
Who's
says.
going to do the work?
Oh, he's a great contractor. He'll work it out.
With Mexicans?
Right. So, what about comprehensive immigration reform? I mean, what happens with a guy like Trump, it seems to me, is he touches on these kind of authenticity, hot button issues, and then all of a sudden, somehow, at least a portion of the electorate loses sight of the answer, which is Congress needs to pass comprehensive immigration reform, which is enforceable by the executive. Pretty simple stuff, really, but it seems like it's gargantuan in our current political system.
Paul, you were
And
supposed
Trump is exploiting that. I mean, Trump is taking advantage of that. That he has presented simple, easy to understand solutions to problems that are not otherwise being addressed. And that has appeal.
And he's not totally wrong. You know, there's a fundamental misconception about large problems in many cases, and it's this: large problems we think necessarily require large answers. They didn't get to be large problems that way. They generally got that way incrementally. And maybe comprehensive. Well, first of all, I think it's beyond the present Congress to do anything that ambitious. But I think maybe the problem is in the whole idea that there ought to be some comprehensive approach to this. There are particular things that can be done, and right or wrong, I think that Trump has seized on some of those.
Well, so much for Trump. He's a window into so much of what is really going on. That's why we're spending time on him. But let's talk a little bit about the cataclysmic Western fires that are burning in California and burning in Washington. Nancy, can you kind of address that a little bit?
Sure. We have a number of firsts here. For the first time, the Department of Natural Resources is asking citizens to serve as volunteer firefighters at incredible personal risk. We also have, for the first time, a Forest Service that is spending more of its budget on firefighting than on all other programs combined. And that includes taking money from clearing forests, from controlled burns that would prevent these wildfires in the future in order to fight the fires that have already broken out. And then since 2000, 70 states have had their largest wildfires on record. So I think we have a perfect firestorm here, which is the combination of global warming, flat budgets for the fire service, and urban development. And it's another perhaps wicked problem that doesn't have, at this point, a single comprehensive solution, but requires our attention. It's urgent.
Certainly requires our attention.
Well, and not just because of the damage that the wildfires are causing, but that's damage that flows from the fact that we have environmental problems.
Right,
I mean,
right.
It seems that there seems to be a water supply to fight the fires, but we all know that California is in the midst of a historic drought, which of course is the cause in part of the wildfires, but also there's this water shortage that California cannot afford to have exacerbated by other problems. We've got a vicious circle going on here that we're having a hard time breaking out of. The success that the firefighters are having is only partial. It is such a serious set of blazes.
Fires are natural phenomena, but in many ways this crisis is man-made. Overdevelopment of marginal environments, changing climate, as was mentioned. A hot, arid region is moving to hotter and bone dry. Forest Service fire suppression policies, which makes the eventual fires even worse. Human refusal to learn from these worsening, ever more expensive complications, that endless development is neither wise nor without consequences. There's a Western singer-songwriter, poet, who, writing about the winds that drive these fires, says the wind moves patiently along, burning down the lies of Western history. One of the lies is that endless development is possible, and that it's even possible in regions that were not meant for those loads of population.
I don't think it's possible to overstate the development problem, because in Maine, the Baxter National State Park, by terms of the will that granted the property to the state, firefighting is prohibited in the state park, and Baxter seems to do just fine as a recreational area and so forth, without interference from man.
Do you think, one quick question, yes or no, are the climate, no, I just want a yes or no, and then we're going to move on to financial markets. Are the climate deniers beginning to quiet down in the light of these tremendous, obvious problems?
It would seem so.
I hope so.
And I hope it's true.
Yeah.
I hope it's real.
I've noticed that they've been less vociferous about the fraud that is being perpetrated on the world by those of us who think that climate change is real and man-made. Financial markets, here we go. They're up, they're down, they're in, they're out. What is going on? The Chinese market has lost huge amounts in the last several weeks. The U.S. market down a couple of thousand points, then up a couple of 1,000 points in the last couple of days. What is going on?
Well, as far as the United States go, I think it's just a contagion. I mean, there's no real reason for the Dow to swing as wildly as it has. Most American companies do not have significant exposure to China's economy. It's just following the leader. It's, fear is easy to spread, and particularly when large sums of money are involved. I think that's what we're seeing now. China is a different story. I mean, how they got themselves into this fix, well, that's probably what we should focus on more, because I think that's where the problems are. The state.
Well, I think Paul's right about things like exposure of American corporations, but the entire country, the entire United States is exposed. We owe China more money than we owe anyone else in the world. It's something well over $1 trillion. We import a huge percentage of things that we need and other things that we merely want from China. And if the Chinese economy teeters significantly or topples, both of those things become major problems.
Nancy?
Quickly, we haven't had an economic recession or depression with this level of democratic dysfunction before.
Ooh.
And so if we can't get this stock market instability under control, I have real concern regarding democratic governance.
I think it's time for fresh thinking about what constitutes secure assets in an increasingly threatening economic climate. The old adage about leaving money in the stock market for the long haul.
I'm curious about what you said, Nancy. Are you suggesting that there is some underlying serious instability inside the American Republican form of government?
We haven't been able to address a number, and we're talking about them on this show, of really pressing public issues because of the dysfunction between the executive and the legislative branches, and how we would then deal with a significant economic crisis becomes an even more troubling question.
Well, on that happy note,
Yeah, sorry about that.
that's our program for this week. You can reach us with your questions and comments at watchapptv.com. Please join us next time. I'm Lee Dunstan. Thank you for watching.